Hi all, welcome to AMH 2010 with Duffy. That's me. We're going to start today with our origins of the Paleo-Indians peoples. So first of all, about 75,000 years ago, we're going to have a great ice age. This is known as the Wisconsin glaciation. What it's going to do is connect two land masses, one being Asia and one being North America, with something called Beringia. Beringia is often also called the Bering Strait Land Bridge, and it is going to be the mass in which people will travel across. Now, that is one theory. There is another theory. This is the coastal migration theory, in which people will take small canoes and they're going to travel the water route instead of the land mass. They're going to utilize sea kelp as their major food source. Either way, we will see a population of people that are going to come here to North America, and archaeologists and historians call them the Paleo-Indians. So paleo like old Stone Age. Now, the time period that we're looking at is roughly 12,000 BCE to 9,000 BCE. So BCE means before the Common Era. Now, the Paleo-Indian peoples are pretty homogeneous. They're going to travel across what we consider the continental United States, and they're going to be hunting the large game animals. That's their food source. Now, as our Paleo-Indians hunt, they're going to be utilizing a very specific spear tip. It's not this one, but it's kind of close. It's called the Clovis point. Now, we know the Paleo-Indian peoples do not have a lot of diversification because we can find this exact same spear tip, this Clovis point, all across the continental United States. I have to be honest with you right now, I love to travel. And I go on road trips and I visit states all across the United States. Wherever I go, the first thing I do is I go to the state capitol. And next to the capitol is usually the state museum. And it will be here where I'm going to challenge myself to a bit of a scavenger hunt. I am searching for a Clovis point. And no matter where I go, whether it's in Texas or Pennsylvania, New York, or even here in Florida, I'm going to find a Clovis point in every single state museum. Now, the large game animals that we're hunting are historically our woolly mammoths, our giant mastodons, and the giant sloth. I gotta be honest, that one's my favorite. A bull sloth, that would be a male giant sloth. He might grow to be about 15 feet tall and roughly 3 tons. So we're talking elephant size. Now, a female giant sloth is going to be a little bit smaller, but still not exactly quick. And I'm not surprised when our Paleo-Indian hunters are going to utilize them for a major food source. Now, roughly 9,000 BCE, we're going to start to see the extinction of our giant sloths and our woolly mammoths and our mastodons. And as this extinction progresses, the people, wherever they are, dispersed across North America, are going to have to find a new food source. It's this new diverse population that we're going to call the Archaic peoples. The time period for our archaic population is roughly 8,000 BCE to 1,000 BCE. And again, I say roughly. The 8,000 equates to the approximate time of the extinction of those large game animals. Yes, I can't draw. All of our animals didn't go extinct all at the same time. So that's why you get the roughly. The 1000 BCE, that equates to the time period of the Neolithic Revolution. The Neolithic Revolution is the dawn of agriculture. It is going to originate here in the Americas in central Mexico. And it actually starts in central Mexico around the year 3000 BCE. Now, our archaic peoples are going to slowly receive this knowledge if they're living closer to central Mexico. So if you're far away from central Mexico, you're not going to be using agriculture as a major food source until much later than those who are closest to Mexico. So again, our time period for the new archaic peoples is roughly the end of the large game animals to the dawn of agriculture. Now, this population is diverse because remember, it's where you're living that's going to determine your major food source. So historians and archaeologists, we have divided the archaic peoples into distinct cultures. We today are going to talk about the 5 distinct cultures of the archaic peoples. We're going to start all the way over on the West Coast. So we're going to start with our Pacific Coast peoples. Now, the Pacific Coast peoples are going to be the most highly populated, and diverse of all of our cultures. So, first of all, highly populated. You're going to see approximately 500 different tribes. These tribes are going to speak over 130 different dialects with over 20 different language families. It's a very highly populated and diverse peoples. Now, why is it so highly populated? Part of that is going to be for all of its resources. So if you're on the Pacific Coast, what's your major food source? Of course, it's anything from the water. We're going to be fishing out of our oceans, and we're going to utilize that food source either in dried form or in fresh. Our other major resource is, of course, the redwood trees. Think about going all the way up into Northern California. Go to Muir Woods, where you see these giant, huge trees, so big you can't wrap your arms around them. Now, we're going to see the usage of these trees in building multifamily cedar homes. So we're going to live in clans in kind of a village structure. You're also going to see the resource, if we can call it that, of really good weather. You can usually expect life along the Pacific Coast to have a fairly good climate. And we're going to see our Pacific Coast peoples will benefit from this. So with temperate weather and available structures for permanent homes, we're now going to have time on our hands. And that time will be allocated to something besides finding shelter and food. It's going to be utilized for the arts. Now, the art is, of course, going to use one of the resources, the trees that are available. Art is going to mostly be done with wood carvings. So you will see very intricately carved canoes. You're going to see, if you go into the far northwestern Pacific, the totem poles. It's this wood carving that will be our focus for Pacific Coast art. Our second major culture of the archaic peoples will be the Great Basin. Now, the Great Basin is located between the Sierra Nevada mountains, out there in California, and the Rocky Mountains. So we're going to take this chunk in the middle. This is going to be our Great Basin. Now, the Great Basin culture will be a traditional hunting-gathering culture. And I want you to stress the gathering on this side. As far as the hunting, we're only going to see small game animals, things like rodents, rabbits, snakes, and such. We're not going to see any large game animals. Again, I want you to stress the gathering. We're going to gather roots, nuts, berries, seeds, things of that nature. And because of this, we're going to have to search for our food, which means this is going to be a nomadic population. The Great Basin here of Idaho and Utah, this territory is a population that are nomadic, that are gathering roots and nuts, and doing a very, very small amount of hunting. Moving further east of the Great Basin, we're going to reach the Great Plains. So now we're going to hear of our Rocky Mountains, and I want you to go east of the Rocky Mountains to the Mississippi River. So it's this region right in here, that's our Great Plains. talking about Kansas, Nebraska, the Dakotas, all the way up to eastern Colorado, this territory right here. Now, the Great Plains culture is also hunter-gatherer, but this time we stress the hunt. Now, the food source for our Great Plains culture is, of course, the bison, the American buffalo. It is going to be descendants of our Great Plains culture that are going to come up with a revolutionary new technology, the bow and arrow. I want us to do a little pretend time. Here in Duffy's American History 2010 class, we utilize something called Duffy Theater quite a bit, in which I traditionally ask for volunteers and we might act out a scenario from history. In this situation, since we're digital, we're not acting anything out as a class, but I want us to just kind of think about things. Imagine that you're a Great Plains hunter and we do not have a bow and arrow yet. So how are you hunting your food source? Well, you're probably going to use your spear, yes. Maybe you've got a different tip, no longer a Clovis point, but you're going to use your spear and you're going to have to get really close to your large game animal. Now, if I've got a big giant buffalo and me, more than likely the one that's going to end up dead is me. Even if I'm using something like an atlatl. An atlatl was kind of a sling in which you could flip your spear tip at a further distance. It's still not as good. Either way, it's the human who ends up dead and not our food source. The advent of the bow and arrow, however, allows me to get much further away and perhaps even hide so that I can shoot my arrow and maybe, if I'm lucky, eat dinner tonight. Following our bison, our Great Plains hunters are, of course, going to traverse large amounts of land trying to find their food. So yes, hunter-gatherer, stress the hunter, and this is also a nomadic population. Our fourth group of archaic peoples are called the Southwestern peoples. The region that we're talking about, New Mexico, Arizona, maybe even far eastern California, this territory is very, very arid. This is going to be a challenging environment for our Southwestern cultures in many ways. This population is very unique because they start just like their northern neighbors, the Great Basin. They start off hunter-gatherer, stress the gatherers. But where they are, New Mexico, yes, Arizona, of course, this is closer to Mexico. And so as we get closer to 3000 into now 2000 BCE, it's our Southwestern culture that is going to transition our archaic population into the Neolithic Revolution. So they start off hunter-gatherer, stress as on the gather, meaning a nomadic peoples. But once they start to receive knowledge of agriculture, they're going to transition into a permanent society that utilizes agriculture as their major food source. Now, we have plenty of evidence of this permanency. We can see the mud huts or the pueblos of the region. We also have evidence of their irrigation and the irrigation techniques. Again, this is a very arid area. You're going to have to use irrigation to grow your corn or maize. Okay, again, let's think about this. I'm living in Arizona. Not a lot of rain there. I'm going to figure out drainage and irrigation so that I can get the proper amount of water to my maize harvest. I'm going to put a lot of time, a lot of effort, we'll call it blood, sweat, and tears, into my land. Notice something. I just called it my land because, yes, if I'm going to irrigate it, put so much time and effort into this property, I'm probably going to delineate it. I'm going to say this area to this area, this and this. This is the land that I'm cultivating. And I'm also going to be willing to defend it. If you're going to try to take it from me after I've put so much work into this, we might see some warfare. So to recap, It's our southwestern culture that starts hunter-gatherer, stress the gatherer, nomadic. They're going to transition into the Neolithic Revolution, creating a permanent society that will utilize agricultural techniques to harvest their major food source of corn. We're now going to move a little bit further east. Number 5 on our archaic peoples cultures is the Eastern Woodlands. This is the territory east of the Mississippi River. For this large territory, we have one distinguishing features of all the Eastern Woodlands cultures, and that is going to be their major food source. For all of the Eastern Woodlands territory, whether you're in northern Michigan all the way down to the Florida Keys, your major food source is deer. Have you seen the Keys deer? They're tiny, adorable. A question, how do we hunt our deer? Yes, we're going to use spears. Yes, we're going to use techniques such as traps and snares. But better than all of that is a new technology, or I should say, one of our oldest technologies. The best way to hunt your deer is using fire. I can see right now I've got some curious looks. Fire. Prescribed burns are actually very good for forests. The first of all, what a burn does is it gets rid of all the undergrowth. So how does that help our Eastern Woodlands hunters? It allows you to see your prey. Deer can blend in really well with all the brambles and brush that are going to be in that undergrowth. If we clear that all out, we can now see the deer. The other aspect to a burn that most people might not realize is that some trees actually need a burn in order to germinate their seeds. In order to drop the next generation of trees, that tree has to go through a burn. It's through that cycle that we're going to get more trees. So in a burn, we don't see major harm to the large trees. We just see a clearing of the growth. Now, that's another helpful aspect of the burn, is the new growth that comes up. And oh yes, by the way, who loves all those new tasty, tender little shoots of growth? It's deer. So the deer are now going to swarm to all this new growth. And again, I can now see them. And yes, I'm going to be able to hunt my prey. Finally, you can also use fire to help you with those snares and traps. Of course, if I know I want to get, or I should say, mobilize the deer in one way, I can start the fire in one location, and I know where their exit strategy will be. So, for our Eastern Woodlands peoples, everything east of the Mississippi River, one of their major food source is going to be deer, and they're going to use fire as the technology that will help them hunt. Now, the Eastern Woodlands is too large of a region, and so what we have done is divided it into 3 distinct subcultures. I utilize the acronym AIM, we did just go hunting, to help us remember these 3 subcultures. Now, the first of our subculture are the Algonquian people. The Algonquian population is going to live along the Atlantic coast. Tried to use as many A words as I could. They're going to live along the Atlantic from Virginia all the way up into Maine, then head into the Canadian territory of Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, head down the St. Lawrence River through all of the Great Lakes, and then the tributaries that come off the Great Lakes. This region, again, is populated by the Algonquian peoples. Now, the Algonquian peoples living along the water are going to, of course, use water and the resource from water, meaning fish, as their secondary food source. So just like our Pacific coast using fish as your secondary food source, You're also going to see a permanent society here with the Algonquian peoples. Now, for American historians, the Algonquian population is very important because they are going to be the very first native peoples that our first successful English colony, the colony of Jamestown, Virginia, are going to come across. So just a little foreshadowing, in 1607, our Jamestown settlers are going to come across the Algonquian population led by Chief Powhatan. That's a story for another lecture. Our second subgroup, the I, are the Iroquois. Now, the Iroquois peoples are more inland. So I want us to start in northern Georgia, and I want us to follow the Appalachians all the way north until you're in the Adirondacks in New York. And I want you to go just a little bit east of that. This is the territory of the Iroquois. Now, not far enough that you're at the coast, not that area, that's Algonquian. It's just this more inland area. Now, the Iroquois peoples are distinctive because of three particular reasons. Number one, they are a matriarchal society. Being a matriarchal society means that the Iroquois are going to follow their lineage through their mother's side. That's number one. Number two, our Iroquois population is also going to embrace agriculture. This means they're going to become an agrarian society. Again, that also means they're going to become a permanent society. We, again, have plenty of evidence of this permanent society of the Iroquois. We can find artifacts of the Iroquois pottery. So when I'm talking about Iroquois pottery, I don't mean teacups and saucers. What I mean are giant earthen vessels. They're way too big to strap on your back and move from one location to the next, which means permanency. Finally, embracing agriculture means also that you're going to be willing to defend your territory. And for the Iroquois, they're going to create the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois Confederacy, also known sometimes as the League of Five Nations, was an alliance or a loose association of sovereign entities. That's a nice technical definition of a confederacy. It is a confederation of 5 tribes: the Seneca, the Onondaga, the Cayuga, the Mohawk, and the Oneida. The League of Five Nations is very important in American history because, again, a little foreshadowing for us, but further on, in the year 1754, we're going to have a gentleman named Benjamin Franklin. He is going to attempt to create a colonial confederacy. This was known as the Albany Plan of Union. It's going to fail, but it was a first attempt, and that's why historians consider it to be a success. Now, in the year 1722, another tribe is going to join the Iroquois Confederacy. This was the Tuscarora. The Tuscarora closely allied with the Oneida population who are going to be in New York. So sometimes, instead of being called the League of Five Nations, sometimes the Iroquois Confederacy is called the League of Six Nations. It really depends on what textbook you're reading. So I'm trying to help us out because it can get a little confusing. Either way, just think of them as the Iroquois Confederacy. One more time. The Iroquois population, more inland, is going to be a major group that will have matriarchal societies. They're going to use agriculture, and they will defend their land together in a confederacy, the Iroquois Confederacy. Our third subculture of the Eastern Woodlands, the M, is Muskogean. Our Muskogean population lived in the American Southeast. Now, this, again, is a very large territory, including Florida this time. But as a large group, it's going to be very diverse. Depending on where you lived in the Southeast, that's going to determine whether you're a nomadic or a permanent society. Now let's take, for example, the Timucuan people who lived in the region of Jacksonville. The Timucuan, right there at the headwaters of the St. John's, right on the coast, a coastal population near the water. I think we're going to see some permanency. Or we could change and talk about the Creek peoples. The Creek population of central Alabama is going to be a much more migratory, nomadic population. So again, depending on where you are, you're going to either be permanent, as in the case of the Timucuan, or migratory, as in the case of the Creeks. Now, there is one major distinctive feature of all of the Muskogean peoples, and that is that they were all polytheistic societies. They all believed in various gods, and they all had one god as one of their major gods, and it was the deity of the sun. So a quick recap. Our Eastern Woodlands peoples, everything east of the Mississippi River to the Atlantic coast, is going to be divided into three subgroups: the Algonquian along the water, the Iroquois who are inland, and the Muskogean who are in the American Southeast. They're all going to utilize deer as a major food source. They will hunt with fire, but depending on where they are, they're going to have distinctive features of their various cultures, and they will also have different food sources. I'm going to skip ahead about 2,000 years, and we're now going to talk about our first European exploration here in North America, which for many is going to be a surprise because it's not Christopher Columbus. It's going to be the Norse. The Norse population, historically out of the region of Norway, we're going to talk about them as the Vikings. In order to understand our Norse adventurers, I'm going to walk us through a family. This family is going to start with a gentleman named Thorvald. Now, Thorvald lived in Norway, and he was a good Viking. He was exploring, and he was pillaging, and he was adventuring with the best of them. Unfortunately for Thorvald, right around the year 960 AD, Thorvald is going to kill a fellow Viking. Murder, manslaughter, either way you want to put it, Thorvald is going to be banished from Norway, and he is going to move to Iceland. Now, when he moves to Iceland, he doesn't go on his own. He is going to travel with his family, and this included his son, Eric. Eric is often referred to as Eric the Red. This could be for his red hair. It could also be for his fiery temper. You see, son Eric is going to follow in Thorvald's footsteps. He is going to travel and explore, at least explore Iceland, and he's also going to murder a fellow Viking. And when this happens, Eric is going to be banished from Iceland. Now, when Eric moves from Iceland in 982, he is going to go to Greenland. And just like his dad, he's not going to travel on his own. He's going to travel with his family. And this included his two sons, Leif and Thorvald. I'm pretty sure that Thorvald was named for Grandpa. So in order to distinguish him, we're going to call him right now Thorvald Jr. They didn't really call him that, but it just kind of helps keep them separate in our brains. It is going to be Leif who's going to be our explorer. Leif is going to travel over here to North America. Now, this is right around the year 1001. He is going to travel in the region of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, this northern part of the Canadian territory, perhaps even coming as far south as northern Maine for us. Now, as he travels this region, he is going to see a land of great meadows. He is going to call that Vinland. That's what that means, land of great meadows. And he is going to establish a community here at Vinland. Now, Leif never lived in this colony. It's actually going to be populated by Thorvald. Thorvald's going to move here to Vinland, and in my brain, I think of him as the mayor of Vinland. And sadly for our history, Thorvald is going to follow in the footsteps of his dad, Thorvald, right around the year 1006, is going to murder somebody. Now, this time, it wasn't a fellow Viking. This time, it was the chief of the native tribe. And instead of getting banished, Thorvald is going to end up dead. Now, with Thorvald's death, we don't see yet the extinction of the community, but it's going to come pretty quickly. Right around the year 1014. That's the end of our Vinland colony. Leif will continue to travel in the region, but no more permanent or quasi-permanent communities here. So really fast, a quick recap here. This again was a gentleman named Leif. He was the son of Eric. So he was Eric's son, or as we call him, Leif Erikson. Leif Erikson is going to be our original Viking explorer. He's going to travel around North America, at least that northern Atlantic part of it, eventually creating a community called Vinland. It will be populated, but just for a short period of time, and then it will be abandoned around the year 1014. And we're going to have to wait for around another 450 years or so for our next European explorers, who we will talk about next time.